What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
Every damn Christmas, they post the same picture. My mother, my brother, his over-filtered wife, their two unnervingly symmetrical kids, even Uncle Ray with his yearly bourbon-stained sweater. All clumped together in front of Grandma's hand-me-down ceramic snowman, grinning like nothing ever happened, like there's no vacancy in the family dynamic, no missing limb from that perfectly posed portrait. And there I am, every year, watching from 2,000 miles away, like some ghost who was once alive in their world, exiled not by violence or some epic betrayal, but by something quieter, colder, by silence, dismissal, erasure dressed up as politeness. I don't think they even say my name anymore. I've become her in conversations, the kind of pronoun you drop like it's inconvenient to be specific. Every holiday, I scroll past their annual post with a clenched jaw and that same twisted cocktail of fury and sorrow, the one that's bitter in the throat but somehow still sticky sweet in your chest, like you almost miss them. Like some part of you still hopes they'd notice the absence. But they never do. And maybe they never did. 8 years ago was the last Christmas I stood in that house, the last time I tried to be one of them. Back then, I still had a pulse in that place, even if it was fading. Back then, I was still Jenna Morgan, the sarcastic daughter with too many opinions, not yet Jenna Morgan, the one who makes things difficult. I showed up with gifts I wrapped myself, thoughtful things, not just store cards or last-minute candles from Walgreens. I smiled through the tension, ignored the digs, laughed at the same tired stories. And then, like always, it cracked. Someone said something, probably Mom, probably about how Zach's kids are just such angels and how some women just aren't made to be mothers, with that tight little smile that's just lipstick over cruelty. I said something back. Not loud, not mean, just honest. And that's what did it. Honesty in that house is the deadliest sin. That night ended with shouting, with doors slammed, with my father sitting in silence and not once looking up from his mashed potatoes. And I never went back. Since then, they've made a tradition out of pretending I never existed. No invitation. No message. No olive branch. Just the photo. Every year. Same corner. Same pose. Same performance. And every time, it punches me in the gut because even when you grow stronger, even when you say you're done, there's something about being deliberately left out of the one group that's supposed to never leave you that never stops stinging. I built a life without them. Brick by brick. In a city that doesn't know my family name, where people value your work more than your politeness at brunch. I founded a company at 32, a dumb idea on paper, a platform that connects small creators with custom manufacturing overseas. My college roommate said it would fail in 6 months. It took 3 years of ramen dinners and pitching to board investors, but I made it. By 36, I had 300 employees, a valuation I never tell anyone out loud, and a list of enemies in Silicon Valley who smile in my face and try to steal my engineers behind my back. But I was there. I was in. And when Forbes called about their honorary 30 under 30 Legacy Edition, I thought it was a prank. I laughed. Then I sent the photo. They ran it with a headline that made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride exactly, but recognition. Visibility. And yet, on December 23rd, there it was again, the photo. My brother's wife posted it first, with some stupid caption like, "All the love in one place." Then my mother, with her cold, clinical version, "So grateful for family." #blessed. And Grandma Evelyn, God bless her, even posted it too, the same shot, framed differently, but still staged like always. No Jenna. No mention. No trace. I stared at that photo longer than I'd like to admit. My finger hovered over the hide post button like it did every year, that tiny gesture of self-preservation I'd learned to rely on. But this year, something cracked. Not the kind of crack that bleeds, the kind that clears your vision. I looked at that fake little Christmas miracle with its matching pajamas and forced joy, and I felt the sudden, scorching clarity that I had let these people dictate the story for too long. They had the photo, the tradition, the public image. But this year, I had the tools. I had the money. And I had the platform. That night, Around 2 in the morning, I opened a browser tab and started searching for billboard companies in their area. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, not at first. But once I saw it, the available unit on Route 23, the one that sat directly across from Grandma's front lawn, the one you cannot ignore when you're stepping out to get the mail or taking a family selfie on the porch, I knew. It was available for a rush booking. High-resolution digital. No profanity allowed, but images and names? Fair game. So I submitted the order. Full week. Starting Christmas Eve. Paid in full. And on the design, I wrote exactly 12 words, clean, white letters on a black background, with my Forbes photo in the corner. It said, "Guess who just made Forbes 30 under 30? Signed, Jenna Morgan." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I had doubts, but because I was electric. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even revenge in the usual sense. It was something more precise, more surgical, like finally scratching an itch in the part of your soul that no therapist or journal ever quite reaches. I waited. And on the morning of the 24th, while their kitchen was probably filled with cinnamon rolls and eggnog and carefully curated smiles, my billboard lit up like a middle finger wrapped in a bow. I didn't post anything. I didn't send a message. I didn't make a scene. But the internet did it for me. Within hours, under their annual photo, the comments started rolling in, not mine, not even from people I knew, but from strangers, friends of friends, locals who saw the sign and connected the dots. Wait, is that her sister? Jenna made Forbes? Damn, they really left her out like that? I'd be sick if my family did this to me. Yo! I drove past her billboard this morning. Iconic. And suddenly, the picture-perfect family Christmas started to unravel, not with a scream, not with a fight, but with a quiet, public humiliation so sharp, so undeniable, even they couldn't smile through it. And you know what? It felt good. You can always tell what kind of family you come from by how they act when they think no one's looking, or worse, when they know people are watching, but they just don't care anymore, and that last Christmas I attended, the one 8 years ago when I finally walked out and didn't look back, wasn't some dramatic movie scene filled with breaking ornaments and thrown wine glasses. It was quieter than that, more cutting. The kind of quiet that hums like a headache and settles into your bones, where you keep waiting for someone to notice you're shrinking into yourself, but instead they just talk louder, laugh harder, pose bigger, as if your discomfort only adds contrast to their celebration. I remember the exact moment it all turned, not with a fight, not even with something loud, but with one of those comments my mother had spent a lifetime perfecting, the kind that wears a smile and a cardigan but slices through you all the same. It started with the gifts, as always, because in my family, presents aren't really about generosity. They're subtle barometers of status and belonging, measuring how well you understand the hierarchy and how obediently you stay within your assigned rank. That year, I had saved up to buy something truly special, not expensive, not flashy, but thoughtful, a vintage tea set for Grandma Evelyn, one I tracked down from the exact pattern she'd lost in the house fire 30 years ago. The one she used to talk about like it was a person. I wrapped it myself, tied it with cloth ribbon instead of paper, added a little tag in my handwriting, and when she opened it, her hands trembled, just slightly, and for a second I thought, maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would be different. But then Diane, because I stopped calling her mom in my head sometime around that same season, leaned forward and gave that dry chuckle she always does when someone other than her gets the spotlight and said, "Well, I guess some people have a lot of time on their hands," followed by that laugh that expects you to join in. No one did. Not even Uncle Ray. Grandma just stared at the box, her smile fading like a Polaroid left out in the sun, and I knew right then that the moment had passed. She wouldn't defend me. None of them would. Later, after dinner, after Zach and his perfect wife Laura had paraded their kids around like golden retrievers at a dog show, I sat alone on the back porch with a paper plate full of pie I didn't want, trying to breathe. That's when Laura found me, sat down next to me with her wine glass, and asked, as if she didn't know so, "Are you still doing that app thing?" Not, "How's your company?" Not, "I saw your name on TechCrunch," even though I knew she had. No, it was a deliberate reduction, a linguistic pat on the head. That app thing. Like I was still 15 and handing out flyers for my garage band. And I just nodded, kept it civil, because I knew anything more would be labeled defensive or difficult or, God forbid, dramatic. But then Zach came out, stood behind her with his arm on her shoulder like some smug prom king who never outgrew the pose, and he grinned and said, "You know, Jenna, I've been thinking, if you ever want to come work with me, I could probably find you a desk." The assumption wasn't just insulting, it was annihilating. As if the only path to value in this family was proximity to him. As if what I was building, the late nights, the debt, the risk, was just a hobby until he validated it. And still, I didn't explode. I just stood up, excused myself, and walked back inside with a smile so fake it made my jaw hurt. It wasn't one moment. It was all of them. The accumulation. The slow erosion of dignity in a house that still used the word grateful like a weapon. Later that night, someone brought out the camera. It's always Zach who sets up the shot. He insists on using the same angle every year, with the snowman and the fireplace and grandma in the center like some holy relic. And this year, like the ones before it, he positioned everyone carefully, arranged the kids just right, adjusted the lighting, made sure Laura's bangs were symmetrical. And when I stood off to the side, coat in hand, purse on my shoulder, no one asked me to stay for the picture. No one even glanced my way. That was the moment. That's when it stopped being a family and started being a photo. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. I drove 4 hours in the dark with no music, just the sound of tires and my heartbeat and the dull, constant ache of being erased by the people who made you. And for years after that, I tried to pretend it didn't bother me, that I was above it, that I didn't need them, but every December, the wound reopened with that annual post. Same angle. Same smiles. Same absence. But this year, when I saw the email from Forbes, the one with the subject line Legacy Feature Confirmation, Jenna Morgan, something inside me shifted. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was the realization that I didn't need to be in their photo to be seen anymore. That I had built something they could never take credit for, never reduce, never find a desk for. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my assistant. I sat in my apartment, still in pajamas, staring at the digital mock-up they sent, my photo, my name, the subheading that called me one of the visionaries redefining creative commerce in the digital era. And then, somewhere between my second cup of coffee and my 10th reread of the article, the idea hit me. Clean. Precise. I could make a statement without ever saying a word. I could put myself back in their lives in a way they couldn't ignore, couldn't crop out, couldn't untag. Not by returning to that house. Not by confronting them directly. But by doing what they had always done, presenting the perfect image at exactly the right moment. So I bought the billboard. Not out of spite. Not even out of pain. I bought it because it was time they saw what they had missed, not just who I'd become, but who I had always been. And when it went live, the photo went up like usual, red pajamas, Uncle Ray mid-laugh, kids holding matching mugs, the ceramic snowman standing guard. But this time, I wasn't the one outside the frame. This time, I was the frame. The thing about revenge, the kind that doesn't yell or slam doors but instead walks in wearing a tailored suit and speaks in legally cleared typography, is that when it finally arrives, it doesn't come with fireworks or applause or even a clean sense of victory. It comes with silence and eerie, reverent kind of quiet, like the hush that falls right before the storm touches down, and in that stillness, all the years of swallowing bitterness begin to vibrate under your skin, not with rage. Exactly, but with a satisfaction so sharp it almost feels like grief. I had the design finalized 3 days before Christmas, reviewed the mock-up so many times I started seeing phantom versions of it on blank walls around my apartment, half convinced the world already knew what I was about to do, but of course, they didn't. That was the point. The Billboard company didn't ask questions, not even when I specified that the image should appear exactly at sunrise on Christmas Eve and remain there for 7 full days, 24 hours a day, visible from Grandma Evelyn's porch, her kitchen window, and, most importantly, the exact spot where they always lined up to take the family photo. The placement wasn't accidental. Nothing about this was. On Christmas Eve, Just as the sun dragged itself over the winter-dulled horizon, my billboard lit up with a calm, confident glare that cut through the icy air like a courtroom exhibit. The background was black, minimalist, no decoration, no embellishment, just my Forbes feature photo, the one where I'm standing in a dark blazer with my arms crossed and my chin slightly raised, and beneath it, in clean, white letters, "Guess who just made Forbes 30 under 30? Signed, simply, Jenna Morgan." It took exactly 19 minutes for the first text message to arrive. It was from my cousin Becky, who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, but somehow still had my number, and it read, "Holy S *********. Did you seriously do that? That's, wow." I didn't reply. I just watched the view count rise on the public Instagram post my brother's wife had uploaded an hour earlier, the same post they published every year. The same grid of curated perfection, designed to scream unity and warmth to 100 acquaintances and old college friends who didn't know the real story. But this time, the caption, some syrupy nonsense about family, blessings, and togetherness, didn't land quite the same way. The comments came in slowly at first, polite little hearts and generic messages about beautiful traditions, but then the real ones started creeping in, first as whispers, then as a chorus. "Wait, isn't that Jenna Morgan on the billboard across from their house? No way, that's iconic." Petty or powerful? You decide. Did they really leave her out again? Some users tagged me directly. Some didn't have to. The photo spoke for itself. And as their notifications began to spiral into something none of them had prepared for, I sat cross-legged in my apartment, a half-empty mug of cold tea beside me, scrolling through each comment like I was reading chapters in a novel I didn't have to write. I didn't post anything myself, not yet, because there's a specific kind of power in withholding your voice when everyone else is finally using theirs on your behalf. By noon, Zach had removed the location tag from their post, subtle but telling. Laura turned her account to private. My mother, in a move so classically Diane it made me laugh out loud, deleted her version of the photo entirely and reposted a filtered image of her wreath-covered front door with a quote about peace and letting go of grudges, as if the billboard was some passive spiritual lesson rather than a calculated statement crafted to disrupt her fantasy of control. Uncle Ray, however, did not disappoint. He commented under Zach's post, "Well damn, at least Jenna didn't burn the place down. Progress." I could almost hear his cackling wheeze from 2 states away. That single comment got over 200 likes in under an hour and cemented what I already knew. People were paying attention, not just to the message, but to the context, to the years of invisible rejection and manipulation that no holiday caption could hide anymore. What none of them realized, or maybe what they couldn't admit even to themselves, was that the photo had always been performative, a performance with very few repeat lines and an ever-shrinking cast of characters. And all I had done was pull back the curtain just enough to show the audience that the play wasn't quite the heartwarming masterpiece it claimed to be. I didn't have to say, "They left me out." I didn't have to write, "This family exiled me for speaking the truth." All I had to do was exist loudly for once, in the same public space they used to erase me. Later that evening, I received an email from a local newspaper, a small publication that mostly covered community events, real estate changes, and occasional human interest pieces about dogs who rescued their owners, asking if I'd be willing to comment on the unexpected viral response to your holiday billboard. I didn't respond to them either. I didn't want this to be a headline. I wanted it to live in that uncomfortable space between celebration and shame, where it belonged. As night fell, I imagined them sitting in the living room, the fireplace roaring, the tree lights blinking, their phones buzzing constantly with the weight of public perception crashing down on their holiday theater. I wondered if Grandma looked out the window and saw my face glowing above the tree lean. I wondered if she remembered that tea set, still sitting dusty on a shelf somewhere, unspoken and unacknowledged. And for the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't feel excluded. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the girl on the outside looking in. I felt seen. But here's the thing about revenge, even the kind served with polish and poise, it never lands clean. Because as I lay in bed that night, my phone still buzzing with retweets and screenshots and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. I couldn't shake this cold little truth, the one that curled itself around my chest like a vine. They might finally see me now, but it took a billboard to get them to look. And deep down, I wasn't sure if that made me triumphant. Or just tragic. There's a strange silence that follows public spectacle, not the calm kind, not the type that comes after closure or some neat emotional resolution, but the type that hangs heavy in the air, like the second before a jury reads a verdict. When the crowd isn't breathing and the walls feel too close, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I found myself waiting, not knowing what exactly for, but knowing with absolute certainty that it was coming, and it wasn't going to be gentle. It started on Christmas morning, right around the time they would normally be exchanging gifts and staging those casual-looking candids that somehow always involved ring lights and Zach yelling at the kids to hold still, when I got the first voicemail from Diane, a tight, clipped message with just enough condescension layered under her brittle composure to remind me that no matter what headlines I made or how high I climbed, in her world, I would always be the difficult one, the one who made people uncomfortable, the one who couldn't just let things go. She didn't say my name. She didn't apologize. She didn't even ask why. She just said, "I hope you're proud of yourself," followed by a long pause, and then, "Merry Christmas," as if that phrase could still function as a period on the end of an accusation. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. The message wasn't meant to start a conversation. It was a defense, a way of reclaiming her role as the victim, of framing my actions as a cruel disruption to the narrative she'd worked so hard to protect. But even as I deleted the message, I felt it burrow under my skin, because part of me had still wanted something else. Not forgiveness, not even warmth, but at least some small sliver of self-awareness, some acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't burned the house down for no reason. Then came the letter. Handwritten. From Grandma Evelyn. Postmarked the same day the billboard went up, which meant she must have seen it almost immediately. The handwriting was shaky, smaller than I remembered, the loops thinner, as if even her pen strokes were exhausted by the weight of family politics. She didn't say much, just that she had seen the sign, that she was glad I was doing well, and that families are complicated, but love doesn't always look the same. A sentence so vague it might as well have been copied from a church bulletin. She enclosed a photo, not the one from this year, but one from maybe 15 years ago, back when I still fit neatly into their world, before the fault lines widened into fractures, before my voice became something they resented instead of heard. In the photo, I'm holding a mug of hot chocolate. Zach has his arm around my shoulders, and Diane is smiling in the background like a woman who believes her life is a catalog spread. It was meant to be a peace offering, I think, but it only made the distance more vivid, not because I missed those moments, but because I finally saw them clearly for what they were, rehearsals. That afternoon, as snow fell soft and slow outside my apartment window, I opened Instagram again, not because I was obsessed with the reaction, though. Let's be honest, part of me absolutely was. But because I was waiting for the moment when the family's social media silence would crack, when one of them would break the pattern and respond publicly, either out of anger or desperation or sheer ego. It was Zach, of course. It had to be him. Always the protector of the image, the golden child with a personal brand to maintain. He posted a black and white photo of the kids by the fireplace, captioned, "In the end, family is what you make of it. Grateful for truth, grace, and moving forward." The comment section exploded. Some of his friends chimed in with support, quoting scripture and posting little platitudes about healing and love. But others, strangers, friends of friends, locals who'd driven past the billboard and connected the dots, weren't as generous. They called him out. They asked about me directly. They reposted my photo. One woman even wrote, "We were neighbors. I remember when Jenna used to babysit your kids. Why'd you all pretend she didn't exist?" That comment alone got nearly 100 likes. No one answered it. The silence was its own admission. I could have let that be the end of it, could have accepted that my message landed, that their perfect little world had been cracked, that I'd finally forced them to see me, but I didn't feel finished. Not yet. Because while the world saw the billboard and called it powerful or petty or poetic, they didn't know what came after, the quiet unraveling behind closed doors, the texts that started flooding in from people I hadn't thought about in years, old high school classmates, former coworkers, even Laura's sister, all of them suddenly eager to reconnect, to catch up, to tell me they'd always admired my grit. But I saw it for what it was, opportunism wearing nostalgia's clothes. Even so, one message stopped me cold, a short, surprisingly honest text from Zach's oldest son, Tyler, who was now 15 and apparently had an Instagram account I didn't know about. It simply said, "Aunt Jenna, that billboard was awesome. I didn't know you were famous. I wish we knew you better." And for the first time since this whole thing began, I felt something that resembled emotion rather than strategy, because Tyler had been 4 the last time I saw him, barely old enough to pronounce my name, and now here he was, watching this chaos unfold through the cracks and reaching out in the only way a teenager knows how. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. But I kept the message. I still haven't replied. By the end of the day, the story had spilled beyond the family and the locals. A viral Twitter thread had picked it up, spun it into a modern-day parable about exclusion and revenge, complete with side-by-side images of the billboard and the family photo. People debated it, dissected it, projected their own family wounds onto mine. Some called me brave. Others called me cruel. A few said I should have gone further. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized that the revenge, as satisfying as it had felt in that initial burst of validation, was starting to mutate into something else. Not regret, exactly, but a question, one I couldn't shake. Did I do this because I wanted to be seen, or because I wanted them to suffer seeing me? I wish I had a clean answer. But revenge never gives you that. It gives you noise. It gives you echoes. It gives you the aftermath, messy and unresolved, just like the people who made you need it in the first place. And as I stood in front of my apartment mirror that night, brushing my hair back with one hand and staring into a face that no longer flinched at being alone, I realized something that made my stomach twist with truth. They might finally be talking about me again. But they still weren't listening. The strange thing about winning, if you can even call it that, is how hollow it feels when the cheers never come from the people you wanted to hear them from, when the moment of triumph, the one you imagined over and over as a soothing balm to years of rejection, ends not in a reunion or an apology or even a confrontation, but in a lingering quiet where no one says what actually matters, and the silence, instead of healing anything, just confirms how deep the fracture really runs, not from one dramatic moment, but from a lifetime of small, intentional acts that told you, again and again, you weren't what they wanted. For the first 2 days after the billboard went up, I felt something close to clarity, not joy, not peace, but a kind of sharpened focus, like I had finally moved from the blurred edges of someone else's story into the center of my own, and for the first time, I didn't care if the narrative made me look like the villain, because the truth was, I'd spent most of my life trying not to take up space, and now that I finally had, I wasn't about to apologize for the size of my shadow. But clarity, as it turns out, is fleeting, and on the 3rd day, when the online noise had started to die down and the texts stopped coming and even the hate-fueled think pieces lost steam, I woke up to an inbox that contained something far more dangerous than judgment. It contained an invitation. It was from Laura, of all people, written in that overly cheerful tone she always used in birthday cards and holiday emails, the kind of voice that made every sentence sound like it had been practiced in the mirror 3 times. She said she thought enough time had passed, that maybe it's time we stop letting the past write our future, and that they were hosting a New Year's brunch just for family, where we can talk, maybe even laugh a little, and just start again. The part that stuck with me, the part one read over and over until the screen blurred, was the phrase, "just for family," as if I'd never been kicked out of that circle in the first place, as if the photo, the years of silence, the subtle digs and deliberate erasures were all just misunderstandings we could sweep under a mimosa and a polite smile. I didn't answer right away. I didn't trust what I was feeling. Because part of me, the part that had built the billboard, that had curated my revenge with surgical precision, wanted to scream, to tell her exactly where she could shove her invitation, to remind her that I hadn't been missing all those years by accident. But there was another part of me, a softer, more dangerous part, that still wanted to be wanted, that still pictured myself at that table, not as a guest of honor or a cautionary tale, but just as someone who belonged. And that's what scared me. Because I knew that going would mean playing a role again, putting on the costume of reconciliation while swallowing every jagged piece of what had come before, and I also knew that not going would leave me in this cold, victorious silence, a woman who proved her point. Yes, but one who still stood alone in the echo of it. The decision haunted me through the week, into the new year, and on the morning of the brunch, I woke up before sunrise, not because I intended to go, but because my body didn't seem to trust that my mind could resist the pull. I made coffee, stared at my phone, and reread the invitation until I couldn't tell if I was more angry at them for sending it or at myself for not immediately deleting it. The idea of showing up, not to forgive, not to forget, but to see began to gnaw at me in a way that felt both humiliating and necessary. Maybe it was closure I was craving. Maybe it was confrontation. Maybe I just wanted to know if they'd flinch when they saw me walk through the door, or if I'd already become a character in their story they'd rewritten too many times to recognize. In the end, I didn't go. I got dressed. I even got in the car. But I drove past the house without stopping, circled the block once, saw Zach's car in the driveway, the kids' jackets slung over the porch rail, a new wreath on the door that looked suspiciously like something I might have picked out 10 years ago, and I kept driving. I drove until the town faded behind me, until my stomach stopped clenching, until the temptation to press the wound back open was replaced by something quieter, sadder, and maybe a little more grown-up, the realization that no billboard, no headline, no perfectly timed act of revenge could fix what they had broken, not because it was unfixable, but because they never believed it needed fixing in the first place. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon in that tired, unceremonious way it always does in January, I opened my laptop and checked the digital schedule for the billboard. Its final hour was ticking down. I watched the screen fade to black, then shift to the next ad, a local car dealership with inflatable mascots and bad font choices, and in that moment, it was over. My message had been sent. My name had been seen. And yet, I felt no applause, no warmth, just the quiet ache of having said everything I ever needed to say, to people who had already stopped listening. Later that night, I posted a photo, not of the billboard, not of my face, but of my desk, cluttered with drafts and blueprints and late-night coffee cups, the real place where I lived, the real story I had been writing this entire time. I captioned it with one sentence: sometimes the only way forward is alone. And that's not a tragedy. That's survival. The post didn't go viral. It didn't need to. Because the billboard wasn't the beginning of my story, and it sure as hell wasn't the end. It was just the proof that I had one. And I wasn't waiting for their permission to tell it anymore.